Testing.
Testing. Testing.
hello.
Hello.
In the adventure.
Hola.
You say
Oh, hola.
Hola.
It says company.
Okay. Is that
The
Angel?
angel?
Okay.
Okay,
Hi.
hi.
Hope
Hope
all
all
is
is
well
well
down
down
in
in
Ecuador.
Ecuador.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thanks so much for joining me tonight. For those who don't know me, my name is Mark Gillette, and I am a NASA JPL Solar System Ambassador. Just want to make sure the sound is okay. Sounds like there's a little feedback going on here. So let me see if I can fix that. Okay, testing. All right. Hopefully that's better. Sounds like there's still some feedback going on, right? Okay, how about now? Does that sound like it fixed the problem? No? So still hearing some feedback? Alrighty. Let's see here. Give me a minute to try to work through this here. All right, testing. Is that better? I know it may be a little difficult to... No, still getting feedback. Okay. Second delay with the feedback. All right, well, what I've got going on here is I've got two laptops. One I'm going to be showing you things on and one I'm broadcasting from. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to fix this. How about that? No, still a delay in there. Okay, what I might... How about that? That's better? Sounds like no. All right, how about now? You know what might be doing it? All right. Is it working now?
Try it again.
Okay, can you hear me? Testing. So what I've got going on here, folks, is two different laptops. One laptop I'm going to be showing you the programs and pictures from. The other one I'm broadcasting from. I couldn't do both from the same laptop, so that's why there may be a little feedback going on. Is there still feedback?
Did you shut off all the microphones except for one?
Yes. Unmute. That's muted. That's muted. That's muted. I've got everything muted. Still hear some feedback? Still hearing feedback. Huh. Let's see, and then turn one on. Let's see. Sounds like your local speakers are monitoring is live in the room. Start by muting both laptops first, and then turn one on. Microphone off. Okay, how is that? Any improvement? Can you even hear me? Can you hear me? No?
That's better if you did.
That's better?
Yeah.
Okay. How about from your end, everyone? Does that sound like it solved the problem? Much better, fixed, very good, awesome. Okay.
Speak up a little bit louder.
All right, so I will try to do my best in speaking louder. Again, for those joining me, my name is Mark Gillette. I am a NASA JPL Solar System Ambassador. And what I'd like to tell everyone is basically that's a fancy way of saying I'm a volunteer. My full-time job is I'm a sociology professor at a college here in Orlando, Valencia College. I've been teaching there for 26 years. But I have lots of hobbies and passions, and one of them is astronomy. So I was fortunate enough to be selected by NASA 2 years ago to be a solar system ambassador. And generally what I do is I go out into the local community here in Orlando and I do presentations about all things related to NASA and astronomy. But with the COVID situation that we have, about a year ago I started live YouTube events here on my channel, and I have done all kinds of presentations regarding things like stars and NASA and rockets. And so tonight's topic is astrophotography. I should say the basics of astrophotography, because I don't want to lead you astray. I'm not an expert at this. I've only been doing astrophotography for roughly about 4 years. So I'm not an expert, and tonight's presentation will absolutely be the basics. So for those of you who have been doing astrophotography on your own, you may know a lot more about this than I do. So I do want to stress it will be the basics. Throughout tonight's presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box. I have my husband here accompanying me tonight. He will be monitoring the chat box. It's very difficult to do presentations like this and monitor the chat box. So he's going to be monitoring the chat box. And if you have any questions, he'll take a look at them and he will notify me and let me know that there's a question. And I will stop and do the very best job I can to answer the question. If I don't know the answer, I will flat out tell you I don't know it, and I do apologize because there's a good chance I may not know the answer to your questions. Again, I do want to reiterate that I'm using 2 computers here tonight, which is a little different than what I generally do. One computer I'm broadcasting from, the other computer I will be showing some software that I use to post-process my pictures. I will be showing you pictures on that laptop. So I'm using a Zoom meeting. So I've got all kinds of things going on. 2 laptops, a Zoom meeting, YouTube, a broadcaster. So we also may run into a situation at one point or another where I am pulling down the internet and something may come to a screeching halt. And if that happens, just kind of bear with me. I'll try to get it all fixed and up and running again. If you get kicked off, just come back and rejoin. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, I kindly ask you to consider to do so. Unless I'm forgetting anything, we're going to go ahead and get started. So, what I'd like to say from the very beginning is, if you have never done astrophotography, you need a lot of patience. It is not as simple as I once thought that it was. I thought all I had to do was go outside at nighttime, take a camera like this, point it up towards the sky, click the button, and bam, I'm going to get a beautiful picture. Nothing could be further from the truth. There is a very, very steep learning curve when it comes to taking astrophotography pictures. But there is great reward in it. If you can get over the significant learning curve and you really start to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, you can come out with some pretty awesome images, like the one that you see on your screen. I'll be showing you a better picture of that, but of course that's Orion's Nebula. A nebula is a area of gas and dust where stars are born. And here is the famous, I better point on this computer screen here, here is the famous horse head, and you can kind of see it's upside down and it looks like a horse's head. That's something that you can get out of this experience, and the pictures that I'm going to show you tonight are absolutely not NASA quality. NASA quality will come from places like the Hubble Space Telescope that's about 250, 300 miles above us, orbiting the Earth every 90 minutes. When you see pictures reported by NASA, many of those pictures will come from the Hubble Space Telescope. So my pictures are not nearly the quality, but I'm very passionate about them because they're my pictures. I put the time and effort into getting them, and so I can look at that and go, hey, that's something I've done. It's kind of like being an artist. I've created my own art. And there is a lot of liberty that you take when you do astrophotography in creating the picture the way that you want to create it. That's another misunderstanding that I had. I thought you go outside, you take a camera, you point it towards the sky, you click the button, and bam, you get this beautiful picture. And what you see in the camera is what is up there. And that's not necessarily the case at all. So when you see astrophotography images, you will often see some degree of artwork that's involved in that picture because the person that post-processed it, I'll talk about that later, had a lot of liberty in doing to that picture what they wanted to do to it. All right, so as I said, you have to have a lot of patience because there are a lot of things that have to go right to get pictures. And so here are some of the potential challenges or hurdles that you can face when doing astrophotography. And at the very top of the list, of course, is weather. Now, I live in Central Florida, just south of Orlando, and we live in a subtropical climate, which means that generally for most of the year it's hot and it's very humid. And when you have a lot of humidity in the air, that's going to that does not allow you to take awesome astrophotography images because the water in the air will distort what you are trying to take a picture of. So that's very problematic. If you lived in a place like northern Chile, the Atacama Desert, where there are a number of large telescopes run by both the European Space Agency and NASA, you're probably going to get much better pictures because it is one of the driest places on Earth. And so you don't have to worry about that humidity that's in the air. If you are in other parts of the U.S., I know that some of you may be out in California, you don't have as much problem with humidity as we do here. So that can be very beneficial to you. Now, for many parts, most parts of the world, certainly including Central Florida, we have these little things called clouds. And clouds can be very problematic when trying to take astrophotography images because once the cloud comes through, naturally, you're not going to get a picture of anything. And so because we have so many clouds, so many days of the year, you may want to go out on any one particular night and do some astrophotography, but you're not going to because there are clouds out. So in Florida, Central Florida, we amateur astronomers will often take advantage of our winter, if you want to call it winter, the winter months, at least December, January, February, where it tends to be cooler, less humidity, and less clouds. Many of the other months throughout the year, it becomes very difficult and very challenging to get outside because of the clouds and humidity. Another challenge when you go and do astrophotography, simply bugs. I don't know where you live, but we have those little bugs called mosquitoes, and they are very persistent. And so you really have to put a lot of bug spray on or they will eat you alive. And so that's another little thing that you have to deal with. Another issue that you have to deal with is making sure that you set up your telescope properly and that it's balanced, because if you don't set it up properly and or it's not balanced, you're going to have problems finding what you want to find to take a picture of and getting the camera to work right with the software on your laptop. Star alignment. Before you even start your astrophotography imaging, as it's called, you have to do what's called a star alignment, and that is make sure that you align your telescope with at least 2 or 3 stars so that it will track, because everything in the sky is moving because the Earth is rotating, and you need your telescope to move along with it. And if your telescope is not moving along with the rotation of the Earth, then you're not going to get anything. Okay, so that's another challenge that you face. Another issue is making sure that you get your telescope and your camera focused properly. Now, if you're taking a picture with a camera during the day of a family member or some object with lots of light, you can tell very, very quickly if it's in focus. But when you're taking pictures of things that are many, many, many light years away from us, and they're very, very small and very, very dim, it can be very challenging to see if those objects are actually in focus. One of the major hurdles that I personally faced in astrophotography at the beginning was I often looked at my pictures as I took each one of them and said, yeah, that looks awesome. It looks like it's in focus. But my friend, and I want to give my friend Leonard a lot of credit here, because he's the person that really walked me through this whole process and helped me so much learning about astrophotography. He would look at my pictures more closely. He's like, no, you don't know what you're doing. These pictures are completely out of focus. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. They look perfect. But what you have to do is you got to go magnify those pictures significantly and look at those stars. Those stars need to be nice and round. And when he magnified them for me, I'm like, oh, God, they looked horrible. And that can be very, very challenging, making sure that you have great focus, because without great focus, you don't get nice, great pictures. Another issue or challenge that you face is telescope tracking. As I mentioned earlier, when you do your star alignment, you need to make sure that your telescope is moving at the same rate that the Earth is rotating, so that you keep in line with whatever you are taking a picture or imaging, because it needs to stay at exactly the same place. And so if you have any problems with your telescope, your mount as it's called, the thing that helps to track in the sky, you're going to be out of focus, and things are not going to go well. Another major problem is light pollution. Living in Central Florida, we have a lot of light pollution. It's horrible. We live in one of the areas of the country that has some of the most significant light pollution. If you ever look at a map of the U.S. at nighttime, you can see the state of Florida, and you can see a line that kind of goes diagonal from the northeast to the southwest part of the state. And that's from Daytona Beach, Orlando, down to the city of Tampa. And so everywhere I look in my yard at nighttime, I'm blasted by light, and that is a significant challenge to the quality of your pictures. You want to get the darkest skies possible. Now, there are ways around this. There are things called filters that you can use on your telescope that will help to reduce some of that light pollution. But your best bet is, if you can ever go somewhere that doesn't have much light pollution, you're going to be doing a lot better, and you can reduce that potential problem. But for most people, that's not an option. For me, I have to drive probably 2 hours to get to a place that has significantly less light pollution than where I live. And quite frankly, that's just not worth it when you can't predict the weather. You know, you don't want to drive 2 hours to a place when they say there's going to be good weather, and you get there and there's not good weather. It's like, oh, I've just wasted 2 hours to get here. Now I need 2 hours to get back. So what I generally do is I kind of take the easy way. I open up the garage door. I sit up right here in my driveway. And if it gets cloudy, I shut it all down. In 10 minutes, everything's in the house and I'm done. So I do live with less quality pictures, knowing that I have to deal with the light pollution that's in my area. But to me, it reduces stress and anxiety from getting in the car and driving with all the equipment to a location and not knowing what I'm going to face. All right, so I'm going to stop there. the point of that was to point out that there are many challenges to getting good images. But again, if you can overcome those challenges, you can really be greatly rewarded with your own deep sky or planetary images, depending on what you're interested in. All right, so what I want to do is I want to mention that I have a YouTube video. And let's see, if I go to my YouTube channel, back in February, I put together a video which is 17 minutes long, and that 17-minute video was posted on, this is it right here, was posted on February the 4th. So after tonight's presentation, if you want to go back to my YouTube channel, look for this video, Astrophotography Telescope Setup. This 17-minute video goes through the basics of how you go about setting up your telescope. And I was first considering showing this video tonight, and then we would go from there. But I thought, you know what, the video's there, and if you're interested in the basics of setting up your telescope, then you can do that on your own. So I do recommend that you take a look at that video. So just look for February the 4th, and you will find the video of how I go about setting up my telescope. Okay. All right. So let me show you this picture right, let's see here. I'm going to go through two examples tonight. The first example will be M42, Messier 42, which is, of course, the Orion Nebula. And the Orion Nebula is perhaps one of the most photographed deep sky objects among amateur astronomers. And so I want to show you different types of images, and I'm going to show you the process that you go through to get the final product. And again, as we go through this, if you have any questions, please type them in the box as they come up, and then I can address them right then and there for you rather than coming back to them later. I do see in the box, Sarah, what's a galaxy? A galaxy is a very large collection of stars, like our sun. Our sun is a star. And so a galaxy is a whole bunch of millions and millions of stars that are all held together by gravity. And I'm going to show you, I told you I'm going to have two examples I'm going to go through tonight. The first one will be the Orion Nebula, and the second one will be M31, the Andromeda Galaxy. So Sarah, hold in there, because I'm going to be talking about the Andromeda Galaxy, which is the closest large galaxy to our galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, and I'm going to show you a picture that I got of the Andromeda Galaxy, which I think you might find to be pretty cool. All right, so again, let's start with M42, the Orion Nebula. I want to show you this picture here. I'm going to show you a picture that is a 5-second exposure picture. That's not the one I want to show you. This is the one I want to show you. All right, so this is what you will get if you go out, you have a clear sky. It's around this time of the year, actually. If you go outside when it gets dark in your location, if there are no clouds, right around, it's about almost 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, you will see Orion's belt, which are 3 stars in a row. And if you look close to the Orion's belt, you will see what seems to be a patchy spot in the sky. And that patchy spot, if you're looking at exactly the right place, you're looking at the Orion Nebula. You can see that with the naked eye. You don't need binoculars. You don't need a telescope. You can actually see it. It's just a fuzzy spot in the sky, though. That's all you're going to see. So if you take your camera and you put it in your telescope and you take one picture for 5 seconds, a 5-second exposure, that basically means that your shutter opens for 5 seconds, it brings in that amount of light and it shuts down. This is what you will get right here. This is a 5-second exposure picture of the Orion Nebula. Okay? So actually, the very first time I did this, I was very impressed. I was like, wow, that's really, really cool. Now, what you have to keep in mind when it comes to astrophotography is it's all about light. Taking any picture at any time, during the day, during the night, it's all about capturing light. But capturing light is extremely important to astrophotography because what we are basically imaging is light. Light that's coming from other stars. And so what we have to do is collect as much light as we possibly can. And so this is just a little bit of light that I collected. Well, that's not going to work out because that's not quite what I'm looking for. I want a much better picture than that. So in order to get a much better picture than that, I'm going to have to gather a whole bunch more light. And how do I do that? Well, I do that by a couple different ways. I can, instead of making it a 5-second exposure, I can make it a 10 or a 20 or a 30 or 60 seconds or 90 seconds or 2 minutes or 5 minutes. When you're doing astrophotography, what you want to do is you want to try to get the longest exposure that you possibly can. So a 2-minute exposure is much better than a 5-second exposure. The problem is this: you have to have your telescope aligned properly. Your mount has to be working properly to keep up with the rotation of the Earth, to stay focused on what you're imaging. And when you look at that amount of time, 2 minutes, something's generally not going to go right. Sometimes you need other equipment. You need what's called a tracker. A tracker will allow you to get longer exposures with your camera. And when you don't have something like that, you may have to limit how long your exposure will be. So another issue is light pollution. When you have a lot of light pollution, you may not be able to take a 2-minute exposure. You may be limited to 90 seconds. A lot of complex information will go into you determining how long your exposure should be. So I have found that in the area that I live in, and with my telescope and my equipment, I'm doing really good if I can get a 90-second exposure. That's about the best that I can do. If I was in a dark location, I may be able to get a 2-minute exposure with my equipment. All right? But I'm limited to 75 seconds, 90 seconds at best. All right, so what's another way of collecting more light rather than just longer exposures? Taking a whole bunch of pictures. And so what you can do is take a whole bunch of 5-second exposure pictures. And then what we do is we use some computer software to stack those images. In other words, to take all of those 5-second exposure pictures and merge them together. And when you merge them together, you're collecting the light that you've collected from each individual image. I hope that makes sense to you. So let me show you what happens when we go from one single 30-second exposure picture, one 5-second exposure picture of the Orion Nebula to 63. This is 63 5-second exposure images. All right, so 65 pictures. I use software, I merged them all together, and here you can see that this is quite a bit more detailed than the one image that I showed you a moment ago. Again, I hope that makes sense. let's see here. M42, Leslie. Oh, Leslie Day. Hello, Leslie. I hope you're doing well. M42 is simply the categorization number for the Orion Nebula. Okay, all the deep sky objects out in the sky, all the stars and the galaxies and the nebulas are all categorized, and each one will be categorized according to a number, and for the Orion Nebula it just simply happens to be M42. All right, so you can see that this picture is better than the first one because the first one is one single image. This one is 63. It's a lot more light was collected. All right, now let me show you what a 75-second exposure picture looks like. All right, now you can see a pretty big difference. So this is one single image, 75 seconds long. You can see a really big difference between these two, can't you? Let me bring that other one up for just a moment here to make a comparison. There you go. There's going outside with the telescope, one picture, 5 seconds exposure. One single picture, 75-second exposure. Really big difference. So you can see the longer the exposures, the more light you're going to collect in one single image, the better quality picture that you're going to end up with. Okay? All right. So let me now show you what it looks like when I take those 75 pictures, those 75-second exposures. I have 86 pictures, and I'm going to merge and stack them all together. Here's what I end up with. Now you're thinking, gee, I'm not sure that even looks as good as the previous one I showed you. The previous one was just one that seemed to have more color. This one is 86 pictures all stacked together. And the reason it looks a little not as good as the last one is because this is part of the stacking process and the post-processing that we will go through, which doesn't make it look as pretty right now, but the end product will be quite fascinating, will be quite good. All right, so let me show you what the process looks like then. All right, I've got a website here for those that are interested. The first thing that you have to do when post-processing your images, and basically what does that mean? That means that you've gone outside, you've taken all of your pictures with your camera, you've loaded them on your computer, you've got 50, 100, 200, 500. Generally, the more pictures you can take, the better. What are you going to do with all of these individual pictures? Well, you need to have some software to merge them together and to stack them, and there are lots of them out there. The one that I use is called Deep Sky Stacker. Okay, it's a free program that you can download to your computer. That's their website, deepskystacker.free.fr. All right, and so here's what the software looks like, right here. And so let me show you what I would do. I would go up here to Open Pictures, and I would find M42. There's Orion Nebula. And I'm going to find, all right, so here is the first of my 75-second images. And I'm going to go down to here, okay? And I'm going to open them. So what I've just done is I have loaded each individual picture that I've taken of the Orion Nebula. Each image is 75 seconds, and I've loaded them all here. There are lots of other steps that you can do, by the way, to enhance your photos, because of our limited time, I'm not going to be going into detail about this. But for example, there are other images that you can add to this, such as what's called flats, darks, and bias frames. Give you an example. A dark is a picture or an image that you take where you basically just put the cap on your camera and you start taking dark photos of nothing, just darkness. But it has to be at the same ISO and the same temperature as the pictures that you have taken of whatever you're imaging, like the Orion Nebula. And those pictures you could load into this software, and it will help to reduce what's called noise or fuzziness within the picture. Another one is called bias frames, and this corrects for bias, hence the name bias frames. So I'm going to go ahead and load some of those bias frames so you can see what I'm talking about. I took some bias frames right here, and so I'm going to take each individual bias I took, and I'm going to load them in there, and they're going to load down here at the bottom. And that's it. I'm going to stop at that. I'm going to check all, and then I'm going to stack checked pictures. Okay, let me increase the size of this a little bit for you. I am going to put myself down here in the bottom, and I'm going to make that bigger for you. You don't need to see me. All right, so hopefully you can see that a little bit better now. Now, what you see happening on the screen is that it is going through, right now it's going through the bias frames and it's looking at them. It's not going to do much analyzing because they're all black pictures. But when it goes through the what's called the light frames, the actual images I took of Orion, it's going to go through each individual picture and it's going to analyze it. And what it's going to do is it's going to count at least, let me see, I've got this written down here. It needs to find at least 20 stars, and it's going to match up the same 20 stars from each individual image. Because see, the program isn't smart enough to know that I'm taking images of the same thing, the Orion Nebula. All it knows is that it needs to see if it can find 20 stars minimum that are spaced out the same amount on each individual image. And if it can do that, then it will take and merge that with that image with all the other images. And see, so now it's in the process of stacking them. Okay, so it's putting them together, it's merging, it's pulling out the light from each individual picture. All right, so I'm not going to let this run. I don't want us to take our time now, but let me show you again what I showed you earlier. What happens when those pictures all come out together? Okay. Here's the final product right there. The final product after stacking. This isn't the final product. This is the first step in post-processing, stacking the pictures. Okay, so that's what you end up with. Now the next step is to use some other type of software to go in and to manipulate and to change and to enhance and to delete certain components of that stacked picture. So you need software in order to do that as well. And so there's lots of software out there that you can use to do your post-processing. Photoshop is one that's often used, but Photoshop is not designed specifically for astrophotography. It's designed for all kinds of applications when it comes to photography. Whereas PixInsight, as it's called, this is their website, pixinsight.com, was designed specifically for astrophotography. So that's what I happen to use. By the way, PixInsight is a European software development program, and it's about $275, so it's not cheap. But it's going to get you further in post-processing your images than something like Photoshop will, okay? Because again, it was designed specifically to do this type of work. So you're looking at about $275. All right, so let me show you what this software looks like. I'm loading PixInsight. All right, so here's what the initial page looks like. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag. I already got this ready to go for tonight's program. I'm going to take that picture that I showed you just a couple minutes ago of M42, the Orion Nebula, and I'm going to load it up. And I'm going to very quickly show you some of the steps that you will go through in order to post-process this picture, okay? So the first thing that you would do, and again, if you're interested in doing this, I would not write down what I'm trying to tell you right now. I would recommend that you just kind of watch me go through the process rather than trying to write it down, because it becomes very confusing very, very quickly. So just here are some of the steps that we're going to go through. I'm going to do what's called a screen transfer function, and I'm going to stretch the image. And you can see right there has been a dramatic change in what the picture looks like, because prior to me stretching it, you couldn't even see what's happening over here, okay? And you can see that this is much greater, you can see a whole lot more than what we could see in the previous step before we did this. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do what's called a dynamic crop. All right, and so I don't want everything in this picture. For example, you may, I don't know how well your screen is, how well you can see this here, but there is something going on up here. There's a number of issues that can come up in your imaging. It could be due to something on your camera lens, something on your telescope lens. It could be your mount is not moving properly. It could be that if you can go out and collect images on different nights. You don't have to do it all in one night. You can go out and get 100 images tonight and 100 images tomorrow night. But if your telescope isn't exactly set up the same way it was the night before, that can cause some problems. And so I've got something going on up here, this whole line. So I don't want that in my image. So you'll also see that there's a dark area here and there's a dark area here. Is that called vignetting? Can't recall exactly what it's called. There's a reason why it's like that. I want to get rid of it. So I'm just going to take and keep what I want. So bam. Let's just say I'm going to keep this portion of the picture and I'm going to get rid of everything else. And I do that simply by going like that. And now I'm going to be working on this part of the picture and everything else is gone. Okay. Let's go to the next step. I'm going to go to Process, All Processes, and I'm going to go to Automatic Background Extractor. I need to change this to Subtraction, and I'm going to process it. Again, I want to reiterate to you that I'm not an expert at this, all right? So I can do the best I can at telling you what's going on here, but I'm not an expert and I don't want to pretend like I'm one. All right, there we go. Okay, so when we stretch and we crop and we start to manipulate the picture, you can see that we are enhancing what we want to see here. Now there's still a lot of what we call noise back in here. This isn't nice and clear. So as we continue going through all of these steps, there are different steps that will help to reduce the noise, but enhance the actual picture itself. All right, so I've got many, many steps. I don't want to go through all of the steps because it would take me quite a while to do that. But if I was able to go through all of the steps with you, we would basically get to this point right here. And this is the final picture. And I think this is it. Yes. All right, so that's my final picture. It's not NASA quality, as I mentioned. You can still see some noise in here. It's not 100% clean, but there are certain limitations that I have to work with, as I stated earlier. Limitations of my telescope, limitations of my camera, limitations of light pollution. All right, so, but I think that's pretty good. When I see that and I think, wow, I did that. I set up my telescope, I did my star alignment, I did my focusing, I gathered all my pictures, I get pretty excited. I'm like, good job. It's pretty cool, okay? Now, as I mentioned earlier, I have one more I want to show you, and that is the,
What kind of camera do you use?
So, very good question. The camera I use is a Canon EOS Rebel T7i. Okay, and so, wait a minute, so you can't see, oh, yeah, I've made myself so small, you can't even see me anymore. Let me fix that for just a moment here. Let's see here. Hello. Me and my long hair. This is my camera. It's a Canon EOS Rebel 7 Ti. And so certain cameras do a much better job at astrophotography than others. And so this camera does a pretty good job. If you get a camera like this and you're using a telescope, there's a nice viewfinder here. You want to make sure that you get a viewfinder that will turn like this, because when the telescope is in an odd position, it's really hard to actually get up or to get down and see it. With this nice viewfinder, you can actually turn it and that problem is solved. All right. And when you do your astrophotography, you're going to want to put your setting here on manual. Okay, you're going to be working all on manual. Okay, so that's the camera. The telescope, let me show you a picture of the telescope. Let me decrease myself again here. I am a professor, as I said earlier, a sociology professor at a college here in Orlando. And so I have a website, and you should be seeing it on your screen here in just a moment, I hope. All right. Okay, there's my website. You can connect to my website if you're interested by going to the About section of my YouTube channel, and there's a link there so you can get to my website. This picture is back in my younger days here. I need to update that. Much shorter hair. But if you go to my pictures, you can see lots of the places that we have traveled to. I've been very fortunate. One of my other hobbies, other than astrophotography, is traveling, and we've been very fortunate to travel to many different places. But I have one here called astronomy, and so this is my telescope setup. It's not an extremely expensive telescope, but it's certainly not one that you go to your local hobby store and pick up. It's a Explore Scientific, that's the brand. It's a 102 millimeter 4-inch aperture. It has what's called an Orion Atlas EQG mount, and that's the thing that allows you to track the sky. All right, so that's the telescope. All right, so let's see, what was I showing you here? Okay. So the other example I wanted to show you tonight, other than M42 or the Orion Nebula, is M31 or the Andromeda Galaxy. That's kind of an exciting thing to image. If you go out on a very clear night without a lot of light pollution, if you know where to look, you can actually see the Andromeda Galaxy without a telescope or a pair of binoculars. Now, it's not going to look like a galaxy. It's going to look like a little fuzzy spot in the sky. But let me show you one single, let's see, that's not the one I want to show you. Here's the one I want to show you. Here is one single picture that I've taken. Now this picture is a 90-second exposure. So I had my cameras connected to my telescope. I set it for ISO 800 and it's a 90-second exposure. And for 90 seconds, this is what I could collect. And that's not too bad for one single image. And you can see the center of the galaxy. So again, Sarah, I know you had asked earlier what a galaxy is. A galaxy is simply a whole bunch of stars, millions of stars, all held together by gravity. And in the center of most galaxies, you have a very, very dense area of stars. And often you have what's called a black hole in the middle. And M31 Andromeda has a black hole in the middle, and that would be the middle. And so if you look very, very carefully, you can kind of see there's a galaxy going on here. But since I didn't collect enough light, it's one single image. This is what we get. By the way, if you look right here and you look right here, there are two satellite galaxies of Andromeda. You're going to see them popping up and showing much better in the merged picture that I show you in just a moment. Okay? Now, so let me show you what happens. There you go. So this is 149 90-second exposure pictures all merged together and post-processed in PixInsight that I was showing you earlier. All right. See the galaxy very clear there, the center of it, the black hole. You got one. This is one galaxy in and of itself. This is another galaxy in and of itself. Two satellite galaxies of Andromeda. The Andromeda Galaxy is about 2.5 million light years from Earth. It's not 2.5 million miles from Earth. It's 2.5 million light years from Earth. Keep in mind that it takes light travels at roughly 186,000 miles in 1 second. So the light that you're looking at right here is from 2.5 million years ago. See, when we go outside at nighttime and we see stars and we see nebula like the Orion Nebula and we see galaxies either with our eyes or through pictures, we're not seeing them as they are right now or when we're looking at them. We're seeing them as they appeared based on how far away they are. And so this image is looking at this galaxy as it appeared 2.5 million years ago. This galaxy could be gone and we wouldn't know it for 2.5 million years. That's really cool. That's one of the cool things about astronomy. When you look up, you're not seeing things as they are right now. You're seeing things as they were in the past. Pretty neat. All right, so that's the Andromeda Galaxy without going through the whole post-processing and so on and so forth. So I see that we're coming to the bottom of the hour. So what I'd like to do in the last couple of minutes that we have, and if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'd like to share some pictures that I have taken And so I showed you, there's Orion Nebula. Came out fairly well, I believe. This is a picture I took just last month. This is the Flame and Horsehead Nebula. Oh, I have Nebula there. I need to change that. It's the nebula. This is 175 50-second exposure pictures, all stacked together in Deep Sky Stacker, like I showed you earlier, and processed in PixInsight. And I mentioned earlier that the Horsehead was in Orion. I'm sorry, I apologize. That's part of the Flame and Horsehead Nebula. Okay. This is a picture I took not long ago. This is of the Triangulum Galaxy, M33. This is the second closest galaxy to ours, right behind Andromeda. Got a lot of noise going on here in the background. I didn't collect as many pictures as I had hoped for. Here's a galaxy that I got a picture of, the Fireworks Galaxy. Here's one I'm pretty proud of. This is called the Helix Nebula. This is only 41 80-second exposure pictures. If you ever have seen the Cosmos series, originally came out by, what was his name? Spencer? Cosmos? What's the guy's name?
Who?
That came out with Cosmos originally.
Carl Sagan.
Carl Sagan. If you ever see Cosmos, the series on television, or the updated one with Neil deGrasse Tyson, they always start the program, the Cosmos program, with this image right here of the Helix Nebula. This is one of my favorite ones here. It came out much better than I thought it would. And this is of the of NGC. This is another classification system. I was mentioning M42, M31. That's the Messier catalog based on the man Charles Messier. But there are several catalogs that these items are cataloged in. And another one is the NGC catalog. So this one is NGC 6960, the Veil Nebula. And so this is 264 30-second exposure pictures. So I wasn't able to go very long on the exposures here, only 30 seconds. Again, the longer your exposure, the better generally. So I wasn't able to get more than 30, but I collected a whole bunch of pictures, 264. So I was able to bring out the light. And so I think this is a pretty cool picture. Speaking of Neil deGrasse Tyson earlier, had the opportunity of meeting him here in Orlando when he came to our Performing Arts Center, Dr. Phillips. I just love meeting super smart, intelligent people. I'm not much into actors and singers and actresses, though some of them are very talented. These are my heroes, astronauts, people like this. I love really smart people, so I was very happy, as you can see, to be able to meet Neil deGrasse Tyson. So yeah, I know we're running out of time, so here are some of my other pictures. I told you how to get to them. Here are a couple galaxies. M81, Bode's galaxy here on the left, and M82, the Cigar galaxy on the right-hand side. Consider that both of these are 12 million light years from Earth. So again, as I mentioned earlier, consider that when we see these, we're seeing them as they were 12 million years ago. It took 12 million years for the light to get from these galaxies to our eyes or to the camera lens. Pretty neat. All right, lots of other pictures I'm going to let you go through if you'd like to. You can, again, connect to my website from going to my YouTube channel, to the About section. I got a link there, and you can link over and take a look at them. All right, so questions. Does anyone have any questions? In your experience, is it possible to get any compelling astrophotos with just a long camera lens, 1200 millimeter, and a steady tripod, instead of a telescope with a special mountain tracker? I don't have any experience doing that whatsoever. My gut tells me that it would be, my gut tells me, I could be totally wrong. Jeremy, my gut tells me you're not going to be able to get a whole lot because you're not tracking with the rotation of the Earth. So you may be able to take very, very short exposures, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, maybe, and you may be able to get a little something. But when you're taking pictures of really deep sky objects, you need that time. And when you're not tracking, you're not going to be able to get that time, unfortunately. But I would try. I'm not an expert in this by any stretch of the imagination. And so what I like to do is I like to try a whole bunch of stuff. And the coronavirus situation that we've got going on is very bad, still continues to be a bad situation, but it has had some upsides for me personally. And one of the upsides is that it's given me a lot of time to explore some of my hobbies because I have been working from home and not going to campus. And so I've had an opportunity to go out and do a lot of astrophotography that I would never otherwise be able to do. And like I tell my students, experience. The more you do something, the better you become at it. And it's so true. Just do it, and you're going to become better at it. And so that's one of the good things that's come out of the last year. Any other questions? Do you have a picture of your camera telescope set up? What devices do you use? So yes, Deepak, go to my go to my faculty website and you can see my telescope right there. All right. Well, if you haven't already, I would appreciate you subscribing to my YouTube channel and liking the page. I highly appreciate it. If you haven't done so already, please let me know how you found out about tonight's presentation. I know that I've been working with a lot of libraries all over the country for the last year. I'm so grateful to them for allowing me this opportunity to share with anyone interested all kinds of topics related to NASA and astronomy. And I am very privileged to be able to spend some of my time with you, and I appreciate you spending time with me. I absolutely do appreciate it so much. I have been doing these YouTube live events every month for the last year, and so I've decided I'm going to take a couple months off, and I'm going to come back and rejoin you probably in the month of June. I'm going to be setting up a schedule probably in May, and what I'm going to do is on my YouTube channel, I'm going to be announcing or have a, nope, I don't want to do that right now. I will have a short little, shall we call it a little advertisement? When you come to my page, it will appear right here, and I'll tell you what events I'll be doing in the next few months. So again, I'm going to take a couple months off. I've been busy doing this. It takes a lot of time, but I do enjoy it. But it takes a lot of effort and time for me to put these presentations together for you. Going to take a little time off and come back and see you like in June. So please make sure to come back and visit my YouTube channel to see what new topics I have for you coming up probably in June or July. So thank you so much for joining me tonight. I hope this was helpful. You can always leave comments or questions on my YouTube channel if you didn't get anything answered that you think of later, and I will address it for you. So thank you so much for coming, and stay safe, and go out and try something new. Life's short, and take advantage of doing something that you've never done before. Thank you so much. Have a good night.